friends, welcome to the Children's Sabbath School study. This week's lesson is titled Of Inestimable Value, with the memory verse, "For you know that it was not with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect." 1 Peter 1:18. The message tells us, we are so valuable to God that He gave everything to redeem us. Now pay attention to the story of this week. Imagine that while you're searching for some old maps, you stumble upon the location of a pirate ship with all its treasures on board. What would you do? What would you be willing to give to obtain that invaluable treasure? In our lesson today, Jesus talks about a similar treasure. Jesus is coming to town! The news spread from house to house. Everyone was excited. People rushed to finish their chores. Children volunteered to help because no one wanted to miss a word of what Jesus would say. Jesus was different and unlike any other teacher of his time. Everyone understood what he said. He told beautiful stories. His narratives had something special. They were interesting. The more you thought about them, the more you discovered. When Jesus began to speak about the kingdom of heaven, he captured the attention of all his listeners. Many wondered if this would be the occasion they had been waiting for, when he would proclaim himself as the Messiah and drive out the Roman invaders who occupied their land. Would there be riches for everyone in the new kingdom? People listened attentively in the hope that they would soon be liberated from their Roman masters. But the kingdom Jesus spoke of had nothing to do with Roman soldiers, nor with any revolution or rebellion. As people returned home, they discussed and meditated on the kingdom described by Jesus. They didn't make much sense of it. It didn't match the picture they had formed of the kingdom. When would they be rid of their cruel Roman oppressors? Jesus' disciples were equally confused. They believed Jesus was the Messiah, but they wanted him to start acting the way they had imagined a king should. They didn't understand anything about his kingdom. Jesus knew how confused his disciples were, so he told them 2 more stories. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who works a rented field. While plowing, he finds a box full of gold, jewels, and precious gems. He rushes home and then goes in search of the landowner. "Would you be willing to sell me the field you rent?" he asks. The owner gives him a price higher than what the farmer can easily pay. He returns home distressed. He doesn't have that much money. He thinks about how he could gather the necessary amount. When he arrives, he begins to sell all his possessions. The farmer's wife bursts into tears and tells him he is a fool. His friends tell him the same thing, but he doesn't take them into account. He only thinks about the moment when the valuable treasure will belong to him. Then he can buy a good house, quality furniture, and many things for his family. Jesus continues, "The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. He travels through many countries, buying and selling pearls. He finds numerous beautiful pearls, but none that are perfect. Until one day he unexpectedly finds it. It is large, luminous, lustrous. It is the pearl he had always dreamed of. Its price is enormous. It will cost him everything he owns, but it's worth it. His friends doubt his sanity, and his family tells him he's a fool. But he sells everything he has to buy the perfect pearl. Jesus' disciples felt uncomfortable. None of them had much, but to give it all. It was too much to ask. Jesus smiled. He knew how they felt. He knew what it meant to give up everything. He had left his place in heaven with his Father. He had left the angels. He had abandoned all his power, his crown, and all the honor and respect he deserved as King and Lord of all creation. Yes, he knew very well what it meant to give everything, but he didn't regret it. Each of his disciples was worth all that. Even if there had been only one, Jesus would have been willing to give up everything to come and live in this world. He valued each one more than the greatest treasure and the most valuable pearl. Jesus knew that over time all the disciples, except Judas, would follow him and give up everything. But he also knew that when they did that, they would discover that they had received more than they had imagined. Jesus smiled. They would understand that when they had given everything voluntarily. Then they would discover a treasure greater and more valuable than everything they had left behind. If you want to know more details, look in your Bible at the references Matthew 13:44, 46, and you can also find more in Words of Life from the Great Teacher in chapters 8 and 9. Support this content by sharing and subscribing to the channel. May God bless you abundantly. See you next week.